In the early days of January 2023, a quiet coastal town in Massachusetts became the center of a disturbing mystery. The disappearance of a woman named Anna Walshe would soon turn into one of the most unsettling true crime cases in recent years. Anna Walshe was a 39-year-old mother of 3 young boys. She lived with her husband, Bryan Walshe, in the small town of Cohasset, Massachusetts. On the surface, the family appeared to be living a comfortable and successful life. Anna worked in real estate for a luxury property company in Washington, D.C. Because of her job, she often traveled between Massachusetts and the nation's capital. Friends described her as ambitious, intelligent, and devoted to her children. Her husband, Bryan Walshe, had a different reputation. While he came from a wealthy background, Bryan had already been involved in legal trouble years earlier. In fact, he had previously been accused of selling fake Andy Warhol paintings online, a fraud case that had placed him under legal scrutiny. Despite that history, the couple continued living together in their large home in Cohasset. But as 2023 began, something inside that household was about to unravel. On January 1st, the first day of the new year, Anna Walshe suddenly disappeared. At first, no one seemed to notice. Her husband later told police that he had last seen Anna early that morning. According to Bryan, Anna had received an unexpected work emergency and needed to travel to Washington, D.C. He claimed she had quickly packed a bag and left the house sometime before sunrise. But there was something strange about this explanation. Anna had not booked a flight. She had not called a car service. And none of her co-workers had contacted her about an emergency meeting. Still, Bryan insisted that she had left the house that morning. For several days, no missing person report was filed. It wasn't until January 4th that Anna's employer in Washington became concerned. She had not shown up for work and had not answered calls or emails. Eventually, the company contacted Anna's family. Soon after, the Cohasset Police Department received a report that Anna Walshe was missing. When officers arrived at the Walshe home, they immediately noticed something unusual. Bryan Walshe appeared calm. Almost too calm. He told investigators that he assumed his wife had simply gone to Washington for work and that he hadn't thought anything was wrong. But detectives found this difficult to believe. Anna was known to speak with her children regularly when she traveled. Now, there had been no contact for several days. Her phone was off. Her bank accounts showed no activity. And no one had seen her since New Year's Day. As the investigation began, the quiet town of Cohasset quickly filled with police officers, investigators, and search teams. Drones flew over wooded areas. Police dogs searched nearby properties. Volunteers helped comb through forests and neighborhoods looking for any sign of Anna Walshe. Meanwhile, investigators began examining Bryan Walshe's timeline. According to Bryan, the morning of January 1st had been ordinary. He said Anna left the house early for the airport. Later that day, he claimed he went to a store to buy cleaning supplies. Then he said he spent time with his children and ran a few errands. But detectives quickly noticed inconsistencies. Security cameras began revealing details Bryan had not mentioned. One camera showed him visiting a Home Depot store. According to investigators, Bryan had purchased items that raised serious questions. These included heavy-duty trash bags, cleaning supplies, tape, and protective materials. At the time, Bryan claimed the items were for simple household tasks. But detectives continued digging. Soon they discovered something even more alarming. Police obtained records from Bryan Walshe's internet searches. What they found shocked investigators. In the days after Anna disappeared, Bryan had searched for disturbing topics online. Searches included questions about how long it takes for a body to decompose. There were also searches about dismembering a body and how to dispose of remains. To investigators, these searches immediately raised red flags. Why would someone whose wife had simply left for work be researching such topics? The deeper detectives looked, the more suspicious Bryan's story became. Then forensic teams began searching the Walshe home. Inside the basement, investigators discovered something that would change the entire investigation. Traces of blood. Not just a small amount. Tests revealed that the blood belonged to Anna Walshe. Suddenly, the missing person case was no longer just a disappearance. It was becoming a suspected homicide. Meanwhile, police continued tracking Bryan's movements during the days after Anna vanished. Surveillance footage from multiple locations began showing him traveling around the Boston area. In several videos, he appeared to be carrying large trash bags. Some of those bags were later found in dumpsters across different towns. When investigators recovered the bags and examined the contents, they discovered disturbing evidence. Among the trash were items stained with blood. Some bags contained cleaning materials. Others contained damaged household objects. For detectives, the evidence was beginning to form a clear pattern. It appeared someone had been trying to clean up a crime scene. And all signs were pointing toward Bryan Walshe. But the investigation was far from over. Because even though evidence suggested something terrible had happened inside the home, one major piece of the puzzle was still missing. Anna Walshe herself had not been found. Without a body, proving a murder case can be extremely difficult. Still, prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to take action. On January 8, 2023, Bryan Walshe was arrested. At first, the charges were limited. He was accused of misleading investigators during the missing person investigation. But detectives continued gathering evidence. And the deeper they looked into Bryan's digital history, the more disturbing the case became. Because investigators would soon uncover dozens of internet searches that revealed what prosecutors believed was a detailed plan. A plan that may have started long before Anna Walshe disappeared. And when those searches were finally revealed in court, they shocked the entire country. But the most chilling discovery was still ahead. Because investigators would soon uncover evidence suggesting that Anna Walshe's disappearance was not an accident. It may have been a carefully planned crime. A crime that began inside the family home on New Year's Day. As the investigation into Anna Walshe's disappearance intensified, the focus quickly turned toward her husband, Bryan Walshe. What initially appeared to be a missing person case was now evolving into something far more disturbing. Detectives began carefully reconstructing Bryan's activities during the days after Anna was last seen. According to Bryan, the morning of January 1st had been simple and uneventful. He said Anna had suddenly received a work emergency and needed to travel to Washington, D.C. He claimed she left the house before sunrise. But investigators soon discovered that this story had serious problems. There were no records showing Anna had booked a flight. There were no rideshare records. No taxi requests. And no one had seen her leaving the property. Even more concerning was the fact that Anna's phone had stopped transmitting location data around the time Bryan claimed she left. To detectives, the timeline was starting to collapse. Meanwhile, police continued reviewing surveillance footage from stores and streets around the Boston area. One video became particularly important. It showed Bryan Walshe inside a Home Depot store on January 2nd. In the footage, Bryan could be seen purchasing several items that immediately raised suspicion. Investigators later revealed the list included heavy-duty contractor trash bags, a large amount of cleaning supplies, tape, and protective materials. At the time, Bryan told investigators the items were for routine home maintenance. But detectives found this explanation difficult to accept. Why would someone buy such large quantities of cleaning materials just one day after their spouse supposedly left for work? The situation became even stranger when investigators tracked Bryan's movements later that week. Using security cameras from nearby businesses, they discovered Bryan had visited several dumpsters across different towns. Each time, he appeared to be carrying large trash bags. Investigators began retrieving the bags from those dumpsters. What they found inside would become key evidence in the case. Several bags contained items stained with blood. Some contained cleaning materials. Others held damaged household objects. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Inside one of the trash bags, investigators found a hacksaw. Nearby were items that appeared to contain biological evidence. Forensic teams began testing everything they recovered. Some of the blood samples were later confirmed to match Anna Walshe. At the same time, investigators were examining Bryan Walshe's digital activity. What they discovered on his internet search history shocked even experienced detectives. In the days after Anna disappeared, Bryan had conducted dozens of disturbing online searches. Some of those searches included questions such as: how long before a body starts to smell? How to stop a body from decomposing? How to dispose of a 115-pound woman's body? Can you be charged with murder without a body? To investigators, these searches were deeply alarming. They appeared to show someone researching how to hide a crime. The searches also appeared to have been conducted from a device inside the Walshe home. When police confronted Bryan with these discoveries, he denied making the searches. Instead, he suggested that someone else might have accessed the computer. But investigators continued gathering more evidence. Then forensic teams made another important discovery inside the Walshe home. In the basement area, investigators detected traces of blood. Further testing revealed that the blood belonged to Anna Walshe. For prosecutors, this discovery suggested that violence had occurred inside the house. Meanwhile, detectives continued building a timeline of Bryan's actions. Cell phone records showed that Bryan had made several trips away from the house in the days following Anna's disappearance. Surveillance footage from multiple locations captured him stopping near dumpsters. Each time, he appeared to dispose of additional bags. The pattern suggested someone trying to remove evidence from the home. But there was still one major problem for investigators. Anna Walshe had not been found. Without a body, proving a murder case can be extremely difficult in court. Still, the growing list of suspicious actions was impossible to ignore. On January 8, 2023, Bryan Walshe was arrested for misleading investigators. During questioning, detectives confronted him with the contradictions in his story. They asked about the Home Depot purchases. They asked about the internet searches. And they asked about the bags he had thrown away. Bryan continued denying any involvement in Anna's disappearance. But the evidence continued growing. Meanwhile, search teams expanded their efforts across Massachusetts. Investigators searched wooded areas, waste facilities, and remote locations where Bryan had traveled. They hoped to find any sign of Anna Walshe. The search involved dozens of officers, forensic specialists, and volunteers. But days passed without a breakthrough. Still, prosecutors believed they were getting closer to understanding what had happened. Then investigators uncovered something that would dramatically change the case. While analyzing Bryan's digital history in greater detail, detectives discovered that the disturbing internet searches had not been limited to a single day. Instead, they had been conducted repeatedly over several days. Some of the searches appeared extremely specific. They included questions about dismemberment, cleaning blood from surfaces, and how to destroy evidence. For prosecutors, the pattern suggested something very serious. It appeared someone had been researching how to cover up a violent crime. And those searches had been made shortly after Anna Walshe disappeared. Soon, prosecutors decided they had enough evidence to escalate the case. Bryan Walshe would now face a much more serious accusation. Authorities began preparing to charge him with murder. The quiet town of Cohasset watched as the case transformed from a missing person investigation into a full homicide case. Neighbors who had once believed the family was living an ordinary life were now faced with a disturbing possibility. Something terrible may have happened inside the Walshe home on New Year's Day. And the person responsible might have been living there all along. But the most shocking revelations were still coming. Because prosecutors were about to reveal new details about the evidence they had recovered. Evidence that suggested the crime had been far more brutal than anyone first imagined. And when those details were finally revealed in court, the entire country would be watching. As investigators continued building their case against Bryan Walshe, the disappearance of Anna Walshe was no longer being treated as a missing person case. By mid-January 2023, authorities believed they were dealing with a murder investigation. But there was still one major challenge. Anna Walshe's body had not been found. In many criminal cases, a body provides crucial forensic evidence that can confirm how and when a victim died. Without it, prosecutors must rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, digital records, and witness testimony. Despite this obstacle, investigators believed they had uncovered enough information to understand what had happened inside the Walshe home. One of the most significant developments came when prosecutors revealed the full list of Bryan Walshe's internet searches. During a court hearing, investigators presented a series of disturbing searches that had been made from a device inside the family home. The list was long. And the questions were chilling. Some of the searches included: how long before a body starts to smell? How to stop a body from decomposing? How long does DNA last? What is the best way to dispose of a body? How to clean blood from wooden floors? How to dismember a body? How to dispose of a body without being caught? When these searches were read aloud in court, the room fell silent. For prosecutors, the pattern suggested something very specific. These searches had been made shortly after Anna Walshe was last seen alive. To investigators, it appeared that someone inside the house had been researching how to hide a violent crime. Bryan Walshe denied making the searches. His defense team argued that the evidence did not prove who had actually typed the questions into the computer. But prosecutors believed the timeline spoke for itself. At the same time, forensic investigators continued analyzing evidence recovered from the dumpsters Bryan had visited. The contents of the trash bags revealed additional disturbing details. Investigators found items such as blood-stained towels, protective gloves, cleaning materials, and damaged household objects. Some items appeared to have been cut or broken. Laboratory tests confirmed that some of the blood belonged to Anna Walshe. These discoveries strengthened the theory that violence had occurred inside the home. Meanwhile, investigators were also examining Bryan Walshe's financial situation. What they found revealed another possible motive. Bryan had been facing serious legal problems even before Anna disappeared. In 2018, he had been charged with federal fraud after selling fake Andy Warhol paintings online. The case had dragged on for several years. At the time of Anna's disappearance, Bryan was still awaiting sentencing. This meant he was under strict legal supervision. Investigators also discovered that Bryan had been struggling financially. Court records suggested he had significant debts. Some prosecutors believed these financial pressures might have contributed to growing tension inside the household. Friends of Anna later told reporters that the couple had experienced difficulties in their marriage. Although the family appeared successful on the outside, those close to Anna suggested that the relationship had become strained. As detectives continued building their timeline, another critical detail emerged. Phone data showed that Anna's device had stopped transmitting signals on January 1st, around the same time Bryan claimed she had left for Washington. But investigators noticed something strange. There were no digital traces showing that Anna had actually traveled anywhere that morning. There were no airport records. No transportation records. No security camera footage showing her leaving the neighborhood. In other words, there was no evidence that Anna had ever left the property alive. Meanwhile, surveillance cameras continued revealing Bryan's movements in the days after Anna disappeared. Footage from several locations showed him visiting dumpsters in different towns across Massachusetts. Each time, he appeared to be disposing of additional trash bags. Investigators believed he was attempting to scatter evidence across multiple locations to avoid detection. But the effort may have actually helped police piece together the timeline of events. As the investigation progressed, prosecutors reached a critical decision. On January 18, 2023, Bryan Walshe was formally charged with the murder of his wife. During the court hearing, prosecutors described the evidence they had collected. They explained how Bryan's statements had changed multiple times during the investigation. They presented the disturbing internet searches. They described the items recovered from dumpsters. And they revealed the forensic evidence linking Anna's blood to the home. Although Anna's body had not been found, prosecutors argued that the evidence showed a clear pattern. They believed Bryan Walshe had killed his wife inside their home on New Year's Day. Then, according to their theory, he had spent the following days attempting to destroy evidence and dispose of her remains. The defense team responded by challenging the prosecution's claims. Bryan's lawyers argued that the case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. They emphasized that Anna Walshe's body had not been recovered. Without it, they argued, prosecutors could not prove exactly what had happened. The defense also questioned whether the internet searches could be directly linked to Bryan. They suggested the possibility that someone else might have used the computer. But prosecutors believed the evidence was strong enough to move forward. The court ruled that the case would proceed through the legal system. Meanwhile, investigators continued searching for any sign of Anna Walshe. Search teams expanded their efforts across Massachusetts. They examined landfills, wooded areas, and remote locations where Bryan had traveled. Despite these extensive efforts, Anna's body was never found. For her family, the lack of answers made the tragedy even more painful. Anna Walshe's friends described her as a dedicated mother who loved her children deeply. Her disappearance left 3 young boys without their mother. As the legal process continued, the case drew national attention. Media outlets across the United States reported on the shocking details of the investigation. The combination of digital evidence, surveillance footage, and disturbing internet searches created a case that fascinated the public. But the final chapter of the story had not yet been written. Because the legal battle was still ahead. And when the case finally moved toward trial, both sides would prepare to present their arguments in court. Prosecutors would attempt to prove that Bryan Walshe had carefully planned the murder of his wife. The defense would attempt to raise doubts about the evidence. And without a body, the courtroom battle would become even more complicated. The fate of Bryan Walshe would ultimately depend on whether a jury believed the evidence told the full story. A story that began with a missing woman on New Year's Day. And a husband whose explanations only raised more questions. As the investigation into Anna Walshe's disappearance continued, the case had already become one of the most widely discussed true crime stories of 2023. What began as a missing person report had now turned into a full murder prosecution. But unlike many homicide cases, there was still one major complication. Anna Walshe's body had never been found. For prosecutors, this meant the entire case would rely on circumstantial evidence. Instead of a body or a confirmed cause of death, they would need to convince a jury using digital records, forensic findings, surveillance footage, and Bryan Walshe's own behavior after Anna disappeared. Despite this challenge, investigators believed they had built a powerful case. According to prosecutors, the evidence suggested that Anna Walshe was killed inside the family's Cohasset home sometime during the early hours of January 1, 2023. They believed the crime may have followed an argument between Bryan and Anna. While the exact details of what happened inside the house remain unknown, investigators believe the violence occurred in the basement area of the home, where forensic teams had discovered traces of Anna's blood. After the alleged murder, prosecutors say Bryan Walshe spent the following days attempting to clean the scene and destroy evidence. Surveillance footage played a key role in this theory. Investigators had collected videos from several businesses and streets around the Boston area. In those recordings, Bryan could be seen traveling between different towns while carrying large trash bags. Police later retrieved some of those bags from dumpsters. Inside, investigators discovered disturbing items. There were blood-stained materials, cleaning supplies, protective gloves, a hacksaw, pieces of household objects that appeared to have been damaged. Laboratory tests confirmed that some of the biological evidence found in the trash belonged to Anna Walshe. For prosecutors, these discoveries supported the theory that Bryan had attempted to dispose of evidence after the killing. But the most chilling part of the case remained Bryan Walshe's internet search history. During court proceedings, prosecutors revealed dozens of searches that had been made from a device inside the home. Some of the searches were extremely specific. How long before a body starts to smell? How to clean blood from wooden floors? How to dispose of a body without being detected? What happens when you dismember a body? How long does DNA remain on surfaces? For investigators, the timing of these searches was critical. Many of them had been made shortly after Anna disappeared. To prosecutors, this suggested someone inside the home had been researching how to cover up a violent crime. Bryan Walshe's defense team strongly rejected this interpretation. They argued that the case relied heavily on assumptions. Without a body, they said, prosecutors could not prove that Anna had actually been murdered. They also argued that there was no direct evidence showing Bryan committing a crime. There were no eyewitnesses. No murder weapon had been definitively linked to the case. And no video showed the alleged crime taking place. According to the defense, the prosecution's theory depended entirely on circumstantial evidence. But prosecutors believed the collection of evidence created a clear picture. They argued that Bryan's statements had repeatedly changed during the investigation. At first, he claimed Anna had simply left for Washington, D.C. Later, investigators discovered there were no travel records supporting that claim. They also pointed to Bryan's trips to multiple dumpsters across Massachusetts. To prosecutors, those trips suggested someone attempting to hide evidence. Meanwhile, the search for Anna Walshe continued for months. Police searched wooded areas, landfills, and remote locations connected to Bryan's movements. But despite extensive efforts, no remains were ever found. For Anna's family and friends, the uncertainty made the tragedy even more painful. They continued hoping for answers. Anna had been known as a hardworking professional and a devoted mother. Her disappearance left behind 3 young children who would grow up without their mother. As the legal process moved forward, Bryan Walshe remained in custody. He pleaded not guilty to the murder charge. The case continued moving through the court system, with prosecutors preparing for a possible trial that could take years to complete. Legal experts noted that cases without a body can be difficult, but they are not impossible to prove. If prosecutors can show that the victim disappeared under suspicious circumstances and that the defendant's actions point toward guilt, juries can still reach a conviction. For now, the final outcome of the case remains uncertain. The courtroom battle has yet to fully unfold. What is clear, however, is that the disappearance of Anna Walshe has left a lasting impact on the community of Cohasset. A family that once appeared normal and successful has become the center of a tragic mystery. A mother vanished without a trace. A husband stands accused of murder. And investigators continue searching for the final pieces of a puzzle that began on the first day of 2023. The truth of what happened inside the quiet home may one day be fully revealed. But until then, the case of Anna Walshe remains a haunting reminder of how quickly an ordinary life can turn into a national crime investigation.